Right back to the beginning.
What's the beginning?
1688. This land here, the deed is 1688, which means that some kind of transaction was made with the local Indians. But it's registered in 1688, and it belonged, I think, to the Beekmans and the Schuyler's. And these big patents, which were enormous, were rented out to tenant farmers with long-term leases. So the land that we're on now is 5 farms, as I understand. And there were little houses, farmsteads, barns, stone walls. This estate was created in 1811 or 1812 by John Armstrong and his wife Alida Livingston Armstrong by buying up the leases from the farmers who were here, paying them off, whatever it took, and then buying the actual land from their cousins. That's why I say it's been us who've been here since the beginning of settlement in 1688. And then they took down the houses and barns and stone walls and used the stone to build this house. Started in 1812, and in a sense it's still under construction. We're still trying to piece it together. It's a very big, grand house for that time, much bigger than the Livingston's house at Claremont. And I can't help but think that people were thinking that Armstrong was a little pretentious to build such a huge house. My life has been different from almost anyone I know for various reasons. Living here and also wherever else I lived, have always been fascinated by museums, architecture, and construction. Has it had an effect on me? Of course, yes, naturally it's had a big effect on my life and my approach to things, living here. I have a lot of memories, images in my head, stories. Some of them may be embroidered a bit. I can't always remember exactly how it was.
Right. Where did you go to school?
I went to Harvard, and I did classics. So that was not exactly preparation for living here at all. I used to live in Poland, I lived in Yugoslavia, I lived in Washington, I lived in New York. I lived in Cambridge when I was a student. So I've been in various places, and I travel a good bit, so I'm not always here.
You said you went to Harvard?
I went to Harvard, and I went to Hopkins. And I was at the university in Belgrade, in Yugoslavia. I'd been in Poland for a year studying, and I ran into trouble with the secret police, so I left quite quickly.
Warsaw, Poland, the only state in Europe flanked by the Russian army on both sides. A communist country, a hotbed of espionage. The building of most interest to communist agents, the American embassy.
There were very few American students there. And I was a pioneer capitalist because I went over on the Polish ocean liner from Canada, and I met a gentleman who was a professor at the medical school in Warsaw, and he suggested that he could introduce me to the vice minister of health, and that they had needs for drugs that I could take care of because I had Western currency that I wanted to turn into Polish money. And this is a way around the restrictions imposed by the National Bank, because the Polish currency itself was not exchangeable. It had no value outside of the country. And so there was a shortage of foreign currency, which they called devisa. All communist countries have this problem. And the ministry needed some medications for the party clinic in Warsaw. This is the elite hospital for the senior members of the Communist Party and some of the military, some of the top generals and people like that. And so I was supplying them with whatever they wanted. I got it from Switzerland in the mail and just sold it to them. And they paid me enough so that I got a fantastic exchange rate for my money. I soon wound up with a problem. I had too much money and nothing to buy. There was
Really?
nothing for sale. I couldn't buy real estate. I did buy a car. I used to eat in restaurants all the time. I had suits made to order. I had boots made by cobblers. I had all sorts of stuff that I didn't need. But this was not lost on the secret police, who were, of course, watching me as a foreign student. And eventually they threatened me, saying that I wasn't allowed to do this, even though I had receipts from the health ministry and all that. And the law basically was what they said it was. There was no appeal to a court or anything like that. At that point, they wanted to recruit me. They were blackmailing me into spying for them. At first, they wanted me to spy on other students, and then who knows. So I was reporting all this to the embassy, which had just discovered that the entire building was bugged from the time it was built 5 or 6 years earlier. And they were kind of paranoid in there too. And when I went and talked to the first secretary, they walked up and down the corridors with a Marine guard with a tape recorder or radio or something with loud music, so that the conversation would be heard on microphones that were only picking up a little bit, and then it would go to the next microphone and the next, and the music would hopefully confuse them. The next time I went back, the Marines had built a little structure of mattresses in the basement, and that's where we had our conversations. But in any case, they arranged for me to leave quite suddenly, and I got out of there. I was really lucky. The police didn't pick it up in time, and I got out of there. So that was the end of my Polish experience. Then I went back 5 years later because I met my future wife. I wanted to see her, and they wouldn't let her out. And they arrested me again. They went through the same routine. At that point, I was a student at Hopkins, and they wanted me to spy on them, and I agreed to do that, so they let me go. Then I went to Yugoslavia, and I was there for 3.5 years. I had an interesting time, learned a great deal, and an interesting part of the world. I feel very comfortable there whenever I go back.
And
I was in Bosnia in '95, right after the war. Then I went to Kosovo in 2001, after the bombing. And I've got to go back there soon. I haven't been in a while.
What brought you to Kosovo and Bosnia?
War. I'm a kind of war tourist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never been in the military, but I like the company of military personnel, and I was visiting the site of warfare without having to participate in it myself. I was the way a journalist might, except that I didn't have any credentials. Mm-hmm. So when I went to Kosovo, I was staying in Pristina. I traveled around. There wasn't any war going on, but they were assassinating, the Albanians were assassinating people. And you weren't supposed to speak Serbo-Croatian. However, I did, and nothing bad happened to me. I met a lot of interesting people. And I visited the CIA headquarters there, just for the hell of it. They didn't know why I was there. They were very surprised. I talked to some Albanian terrorists, and there were troops from various countries, mostly NATO troops, European Union forces and stuff like that. It was very interesting.
What draws you into the dysfunction?
The dysfunction of government?
Yeah. What do you find so interesting about it?
Well, it's a challenge. Somebody's trying to keep control.
Are you afraid of dying?
You can't. If you start thinking like that, you wouldn't go anywhere. I've never actually been in a place where people were shooting at each other that I know of, but I was in Kosovska Mitrovica in northern Kosovo, where the other side of the river, sort of divided by a river, was in the hands of the Serbs. And they had snipers in there. They were taking pot shots at people on the side of the river that I was on. And the French were guarding the south side of the river, the French army, because it was a NATO force. And I started to cross this bridge, and there were piles of sandbags and gun emplacements there. And it was guarded by the French Foreign Legion. I'd never encountered the Legion. You never see them in France. They don't serve in France. And the troops were all big African guys. They were all more than 6 feet tall, and they went out and grabbed me and got me off that bridge because they said as soon as I get a little bit closer, they'd pick me off, the Serbs would. It's pretty interesting just to see that. And that was a dangerous place. So they told me I should have had a flak jacket or something when I was there. Of course, what did I know? Just wandering around. When people asked me what I did, I'm just a tourist. Well, of course, that didn't make any sense. They assumed I was some kind of agent or representative of some intelligence agency or something. But I wasn't.
When did you decide to settle back here in New York?
I don't know, it just happened. I came back from Yugoslavia. I don't know, I moved here in 1970, I think, or 71.
And you became the caretaker of the estate?
I just became the, what do you call it? Jack of all trades, something like that. Yeah. I have no way, of course, of anticipating dying soon. I don't know. I don't have anything much wrong with me at the moment, but you never know. I'm 77. That's pretty old. And it hasn't really hampered me traveling. So
that's awesome.
I better get going, because in a few years I could be hobbling around or something happened to me.
I know. You should get traveling.
I gotta travel, yeah. I gotta see these places while I'm still alive. I gotta get going.
It says berry soda with a hot streak.
You don't have to drink
Michael?
it.
I don't want to roll. Oh my God. Sage, you're next. Oh my God.
No, I'm just trying to mix up the stuff. So
Oh my God.
you have to try.
What's all
Everyone's
the
trying. It's like communion. You gotta have.
Oliver, you have to try it.
We have insurance. You're covered, though.
Oh my God, it smells like teriyaki sauce. It smells so bad. Oh my God.
Okay, bottoms up. Come on.
Oh my God. It's not that bad. What's wrong with you? It's good.
He just ain't right. There's something wrong.
It's good.
Something wrong with him.
It's definitely fine.
Yeah. I have no.
Just for the record, we're not giving these kids alcohol.
No, there's no alcohol.
On the record.
It's just soda.
There's no alcohol in it. I feel I should give you something, some kind of sustenance here. You're my guest.